I have a habit that's a little embarrassing. Every time I open my phone, I tell myself, just a quick look at the news. But what happens next is probably something you can guess. I don't stop at normal news. My brain, and probably yours
Just
too,
one quick
gets
look.
pulled straight toward headlines like shocking scandal, the secret behind, the truth that stunned the world, that kind of thing. The funny part is, I know those headlines are often exaggerated. Sometimes after reading them, I even feel a little annoyed. But strangely enough, the next day, I still click again. At one point I asked myself a rather uncomfortable question. If I know this stuff is mostly pointless, why do I keep getting pulled into it? And it's not just me. If you look around, you'll notice something interesting. Good news is usually quiet. Bad news spreads like wildfire. A well-known study from MIT found that false news spreads faster than true news, especially when it's shocking or frightening. At first glance, it might seem like humans simply love drama. But after reading quite a bit about psychology and neuroscience, I started to suspect something else. Maybe the problem isn't that we like drama. Maybe the problem is that our brains are designed to pay attention to it. Not because of social media, not because of journalism, but because of a survival mechanism that has existed for tens of thousands of years. A mechanism that once helped our ancestors stay alive in the wild. But today, it's being heavily exploited by the internet and modern algorithms. And if we don't understand what's actually happening inside our own heads,
it started
we
here
can easily
and
be
rapidly
pulled
engulfed
around
the
by things
entire
that are loud, sensational, and emotionally intense, but not truly important. After looking deeper into this, I realized something quite interesting. Our brains were not designed to search for truth. They were designed to search for danger. That might sound pessimistic, but from a survival perspective, it makes perfect sense. Imagine living 30,000 years ago. You're walking through a forest. You hear the leaves rustling.
Sometimes
There are
the
two
solution isn't
possibilities.
obvious, and we're
One,
left scratching our
it's
heads.
just the wind. 2, it's a predator moving closer. If you guess wrong and think, it's probably just the wind, that might be the last guess you ever make. But if you overreact, jump, run away, the only cost is a bit of unnecessary effort. Over thousands of generations, the human brain developed a very clear rule. It's better to overreact than to miss a real threat. In psychology, this is called negativity bias, our tendency to pay more attention to negative information. From a biological perspective, when we see shocking or threatening information, a part of the brain called the amygdala reacts very quickly.
Saber-toothed tiger was a
Think of it as the
formidable
brain's
predator,
fire alarm.
often competing with
It doesn't
early
wait
man
for careful
shelter
analysis.
and resources.
It doesn't require logical reasoning. It does one thing. Pay attention immediately. This could be dangerous. At that moment, the body releases several chemicals such as adrenaline, to prepare for quick reaction, cortisol, to increase alertness, and sometimes dopamine, which fuels curiosity and stimulation. Strangely enough, a shocking piece of news can create a small biological thrill, similar to the feeling you get while watching a suspenseful movie. The brain interprets it as, this might be important information for survival. The problem is, this system evolved for jungles and predators, not for social media, sensational headlines, and recommendation algorithms. And when those two worlds collide, our ancient brain systems almost don't stand a chance. Interestingly, while we're reading shocking news, it usually doesn't feel unpleasant. In fact, it can feel oddly engaging. You might recognize the pattern. A dramatic headline appears. You click it. After finishing the article, another related story appears. Then another. And another. Your brain quietly says, there might be more important information here. A little dopamine from curiosity. A little adrenaline from tension. a little cortisol from heightened alertness. Together, these create a very familiar state. Tense, but still wanting to keep scrolling. Just like watching a thriller. But the real problem appears afterward. After consuming too much negative news, many people notice something subtle. Their mood feels heavier. Not because something bad actually happened in their own lives, but because their brain just processed dozens of false danger signals. The brain doesn't clearly distinguish between a tiger in the forest and a scandal on the internet. Both activate the same alarm system. And when this system is triggered too frequently, the body begins to pay the price. People often notice symptoms like difficulty concentrating, increased irritability, trouble sleeping, or a vague feeling that the world is becoming worse and worse. In psychology, this pattern is sometimes called doom scrolling, endlessly consuming negative news even though it makes you feel worse. The irony is this. While you're doing it, your brain believes it's protecting you by gathering danger-related information. But in the long run, it leaves your nervous system in a state of constant low-level alert. It's like having a fire alarm in your house that goes off 10 times a day just because someone is cooking. There is no real fire, but the alarm system keeps ringing anyway. After understanding this mechanism, I realized something important. Many people think the solution is stop reading the news entirely. Avoid all negative information. Cut yourself off from everything stressful. That sounds reasonable, but in reality, it's not sustainable. Humans naturally need information about potential threats. If you lived in the wild, you would absolutely need to know where predators are, whether the weather is changing, whether another tribe is approaching. So the problem isn't paying attention to danger. The real problem is this. Our brains are now receiving far too many false danger signals. In the past, a person might encounter only a few threats in an entire week. Today, open your phone for 10 minutes and you might see war, accidents, scandals, crises, conflicts, sensational headlines, all mixed together in one endless stream. Our ancient brain simply wasn't designed for this density of information. It's like a car built for small village roads, suddenly thrown onto a highway moving at 200 kilometers per hour. So the real goal is not to become someone who never gets attracted to drama. That's almost impossible. A more realistic goal is this. Understand how the brain works and reduce the damage. It's similar to knowing that sugar triggers dopamine. You don't have to ban desserts completely, but you probably wouldn't eat cake all day long. The same applies to sensational news. You don't have to eliminate it entirely, but you can manage how much of it you consume. And once you realize that your brain is simply doing its survival job, you stop blaming yourself so much. And you begin to ask a more practical question. How can I live with this ancient system without letting it control my mind? After learning what's happening inside the brain, I started experimenting with a few small habits. Not quitting the internet, just placing a few simple guardrails for my ancient brain. And interestingly, they helped. 1. Before opening the news, I asked myself a simple question. Will this information help me take any action? If the answer is no, then it's probably just emotional stimulation. Our brains love the feeling of discovering new information because dopamine is released when we learn something new. But if the information doesn't change any decision in your life, it often becomes just fuel for the brain's alarm system. The limitation of this method is simple. You will still feel curious, and sometimes still click. That's normal. 2. While reading the news, if I notice myself jumping from one article to another, I pause and ask, Is this information or emotional stimulation?
As the input
Truly
increases,
useful
the brain
information
struggles to
tends to
cope,
be calm
leading
and
to an
detailed.
eventual system overload.
Sensational news tends to trigger fear, outrage, or curiosity. Recognizing this difference helps re-engage the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for slow, rational thinking. Of course, this doesn't always work. Algorithms are very good at keeping your attention. 3. After reading too much negative news. If I realize I've been doom scrolling for 20 to 30 minutes, I do something very simple. I move my body. A short walk, drinking water, stepping outside for fresh air. Light physical movement helps the nervous system reduce cortisol and adrenaline, like lowering the volume on the fire alarm. 4. Over the long term, I try to choose calmer news sources. Not because they are more entertaining, but because they don't constantly trigger the brain's survival system artificially. The limitation of all these strategies is simple. They won't stop the brain from being attracted to drama, but they can help you reduce how often you get pulled into it. And sometimes reducing it by just 30 to 40% can already make your mind feel much lighter. After understanding this better, I started seeing my drama attraction habit differently. I stopped blaming myself so much. Because the truth is, our brains aren't broken. They're just running very old software. Software written in a time when every piece of threatening information could determine life or death. Back then, paying attention to bad news was an advantage. Those who noticed danger faster had a better chance of surviving. But today things are different. We are no longer living in the wild. We live in an information-saturated world, where thousands of danger signals can appear on our screens every day. And most of them have nothing to do with our actual lives. But the ancient brain doesn't know that. It keeps doing its job. Pay attention. This might be dangerous. So the goal of understanding brain science isn't to become a person who is perfectly rational and immune to emotions. That person almost doesn't exist. A more realistic goal is this. Recognize when your brain is reacting out of ancient survival instincts, and when something truly deserves your attention. Knowledge doesn't turn you into a machine, but it gives you the ability to choose your response. You can still read the news. Still be curious. Still care about what's happening in the world. But sometimes you'll pause and ask yourself, is this actually important for my life? Or just another alarm from an ancient brain? And sometimes, that small pause alone is enough to help you take back a little control of your own mind. Disclaimer. This content is intended to share scientific insights and life perspectives. It does not replace professional medical or psychological advice. If you are experiencing serious stress, anxiety, sleep problems, or mental health concerns, please consult a qualified healthcare professional or medical specialist for appropriate guidance.